Good morning to everybody, especially to our colleagues from the South and from Bayamón. And we are very glad that you could make it. And I hope that today is going to be a very productive day and that it will have convey a lot of information that will be very useful for our purpose of establishing collaborative research and especially translational research. So without further ado, I would like Dr. Walter Frontera to address us with some greetings. And also, if I may, I would like people afterwards to introduce themselves so that the speakers know whom they are speaking to, since we are a small group. And it can be done fairly quickly so that they will know who's the crowd. Okay? So, Walter.
Buenos días. Gracias, Margarita. Good morning to all. Thank you very much for the invitation to say a brief welcome. As you well know, we're trying to build a consortium of institutions and people in Puerto Rico to conduct clinical and translational research. And so this consortium that is being funded and supported by NIH intends to develop a very nice network of people, ideas, resources for clinical research in the island to become, an excellent, to have an excellent level of activity. Now, this is not being done in isolation of other people, places, and so on, which is why we have invited our colleagues from the RTERN network to come to Puerto Rico and talk to us about their experiences in translational research. So I'd like to welcome, first of all, our colleagues from UCC and Ponce to the Medical Sciences Campus. Thank you for being here today. And especially to our invited guests from all the way from Hawaii to California to other places, I guess. The idea of today's session is to actually hear from people who have been actively involved in networking in the area of translational research, and to actually share with them our own experiences here in Puerto Rico. So I hope that this morning and this afternoon results in a very nice interaction, very nice exchange of ideas, and thank you very much for being here.
Thank you very much, Walter, and thank everybody. I want to thank everybody for coming out today. But I think, as Margarita said, we want to first start out with everybody sort of introducing themselves and who they are, so we know who the audience is. But I just want to say briefly, my goal today is twofold. First, a disclaimer: I stepped down as interim president, so I got a little more time here, so that's good. But more importantly, we want to hear from you. Okay, so I want to be able to provide some framework around some of the things that we're doing within the RCMI community, but I think this is an opportunity to make sure that we hear more broadly around what people think will help them advance their research, right? So this is an opportunity for us to think about this. The RCMI Translational Research Network, which I'll talk about, will be going up for renewal in several months. And this is a time to first let everybody know what's been put in place, but more importantly, what everybody thinks will be most effective for the next 5 years in helping to advance research. That being said, why don't we start with having everybody introduce themselves, say a little about themselves, and then I'll give a little introduction about my perspectives on translational research, talk a little bit about the RTERN network. We'll have some dialogue and conversation, and that's what we'll do for the day. We'll talk a little bit, and then at the end of the day, or the latter part, we'll talk about the G12 applications. Within the G12 applications, there is some specific language that talks about partnering with the Translational Research Network in order to facilitate collaborations within the RCMI community. And we want to talk about how people might best position their application when they're putting it together to make sure that they're taking advantage of both the network and really making those collaborations happen and really making sure your application gets funded, and not necessarily in that order. Well, everybody here is pretty involved with the RCMI program, it looks like. So it's a good start. So I want to talk about, just initially, it's translational research. Why it's important, why it's become, or at least why it had become an important aspect of the roadmap for the National Institutes of Health, although now there's been transition in leadership of the National Institutes of Health. But I still think personally that it's an important concept, and I think it's something that is going to be important for us to lock into as clinician scientists and as administrators who are overseeing health sciences campuses, to really understand why it's important and what it is that we're trying to accomplish. So my goal, I have not yet accomplished this, but my goal was to have everybody's computer on our campus, at least all the researchers, that when they start the day, this would come up on their computer first. Have you translated your research today? And the important part is, research is great, and researchers love to do research, and I do. So I'm a kidney specialist by training. But what Congress wants to know, and what our patients want to know is our research helping them live better lives and live longer? They're not interested in the papers we publish. They're not interested in the presentations we give at meetings. They want to know, are their lives improving? Our political representatives want to make sure that the people who vote for them are around for the next campaign to vote for them again. So they want to make sure that science is not being done just for the sake of science, but to actually improve the quantity and quality of life. And so people talk about, are we really translating these research advances into tangible benefits? When I think of translational research, I think of it as a conceptual framework that says there's an interdependence between basic research, clinical research, community research, community activities, and then how all that comes together to ultimately change policy. And I'll make these slides available for everybody. And it goes both ways. It should not only be that when someone's sitting down working on a new signal transduction factor and looking at some molecular signaling, that they should have in their mind not how I'm going to get another paper or another grant funded, although that still should be in their mind. But what they should have in their mind is, how am I going to improve the health of somebody in my community? How is this really going to make a difference? And I think just having that in their mind actually changes how they think about the research they're doing. And it's hard to happen if you're just sitting in your lab by yourself. But if you actually have an opportunity to sit down with people in the community, talk to them about what you're doing, they're asking you questions, you start thinking about it differently. If you start talking to some of the clinicians who might eventually have to do clinical studies, or even some counterparts who may be working with animal models, then you might start thinking differently about what it is I need to do to make sure these basic science advances can actually be tangible and relevant to move forward to the animal model, to the clinical, to become available to the general public. Because a lot of people, you could be excited about something you're doing, and you say, well, this is going to improve high blood pressure. I have a new drug, it's going to improve high blood pressure, it's going to be great. The only problem is people's hair is going to turn orange. But orange isn't that bad. It's my favorite color. And then people are working on it for years and years and years. They spend lots of money, and then it gets to the public, and everybody says, I don't want my hair orange. Why do we waste our time doing research on something that's going to turn our hair orange? And so the NIH is really focusing on making sure that science is not moving forward in a silo, but moving forward as part of a team with basic scientists, clinical scientists, community health leaders, sort of working together. And so that's, in my mind, where the role of translational research or translational science. And so for me, that's why it's becoming so important. Because there is a higher level of accountability for scientists now, and a higher accountability for how funds that come to our institutions, medical campuses, health sciences campuses, how are those really making a difference? And so we as investigators, clinicians, administrators have more and more accountability, both at the clinical level, what we're doing, and from a research perspective. And it's that accountability that says we really need to start thinking about doing things differently. So a lot of people say, I'm great, what I've been doing is great, why should I change? America is wonderful. We have some of the best health care in the world. Why should we change? So we do have, so the question is there something wrong with our present system? Why should we change? First, I would say, if everything is great, that is absolutely the time to change. Because if you wait until it starts becoming a problem, you've waited too long. So when things are great is the best opportunity to change. But I'm not sure it's quite so great. So this is a report on adjusted death rates for a consortium of developed countries, Economic Cooperation and Development Consortia, 1997-98 data and 2002-2003, and this came out about 2 years ago, 2008. And what it says is, in terms of mortality, preventable mortality, of these 19 countries, the United States was number 15 in 1997-98. But we changed. And by 22-23, we were number 19 out of 19. So for preventable deaths among 19 developed countries, we rank last. So maybe we're not quite as great as we think we are. And maybe there is an opportunity for us to do better. And there's France, right? So we don't want French fries, we want freedom fries now because their health ratings are so good. So the question is, how do we do things differently? So one perspective is, for a lot of cutting edge advances, there's a lot of great research coming through in America, but is it getting to the general population, or is it just getting to a small subset of individuals? And clearly the general population as a whole, if we're 19 out of 19 developed nations, we do have room for improvement. In addition, even though we're number 19 out of 19, we spend per person probably 2 to 5 times more than any other country. So in order to be last, we spend 2 to 5 times more per person for health care. So there are a variety of potential reasons why that may be. And one is maybe we are too focused on disease. We talk about health care and we talk about health in this country, but we don't really focus on health. We focus on disease. The National Institutes of Health, every institute is a disease, or not all, but most of them are disease-based. Medicare, it has been a fight over years to get Medicare to pay for preventive services. And there's only a handful, just a few different screenings will Medicare pay for. But Medicare, which is probably the largest health care payer in the country, only pays for disease. And so we have a system that is focused on disease rather than focused on health. When I talk to my community members, everybody says, it's easy, Dr. Norris. Nobody's interested in preventing. All the money is made in treating diseases. Not curing diseases, treating diseases. No, they say, you telling me all the smart people out there, all the money, no one can cure any of these things? We don't believe it. They can cure it if they want to. They just make more money treating it and having people take medicine. So that's a perception that's out there and something that we have to, as stewards of the health community, things we need to be aware of and be thinking about. And then one concept is that maybe our structure for health research is fairly antiquated, and that because we have been working very much in silos, that we've gotten the results we've gotten. And there are clearly certain advantages to working in silos, but, and you can probably have more focus on addressing certain issues, but by working in silos, we miss a lot of opportunities that may happen by working more collaboratively. Now, this becomes very challenging, particularly for us at universities. Because now when you're looking to get promoted, your department chair, your dean says, what did you do? And I said, you know, your promotion, your team's not getting promoted. Your team's not going from assistant to associate professor, you are. And so it's a challenge when your resume goes in, your curriculum vitae, and the promotions committee looks and says, how many first author publications do you have? Or how many senior author where you're overseeing the work? How many of those do you have? You say, well, I'm part of a team. I've been working with these teams and I have a whole bunch, but I'm not really, I'm sort of in the middle. And everybody says, well, that's really nice, but you're not going to get promoted. And so we have to start thinking about the promotion systems to make sure that people are rewarded and incentivized to work as part of a team. And so that's part of the challenge if we're going to move to having more translational science. How do you bring people together and reward them for being part of a team? Because they say, I don't have time for that. That team thing is really good. I got to get my papers out so I can get promoted. Okay. And so there may be some other factors as well. Some of you have seen this before. This was from a New England Journal of Medicine article by Dr. Claude Lafont, who used to be the director of the National Heart, Lung, Blood Institute. And he wrote an article called Lost in Translation. And so I always use this because I think it captures, thank you. It captures a sentiment for translational science that resonates with me. And he said, enormous amounts of new knowledge are barreling down the information highway. So we have proteomics, genomics, these microarrays, there's data all over the place. But they are not arriving at the doorsteps of our patients. Okay, so all this information, but is it getting to the doorsteps of our patients? And this is particularly true for disproportionately high percentage of women, racial and ethnic minorities, and other high-risk groups in the United States. So we have all this information, but is it making a difference? And so what we have to be thinking about is how we're going to make a difference. And a lot of our work and effort is really directed to, how do I say I've done a lot of stuff, right? Rather than how have I made a difference. So the issue of who will really benefit from research results is especially critical, as we see more and more of proteomic and genomic and metabolomics. So you have all this data and these microarrays and genes, and people are looking at, I applied this drug and 85 of these genes went up and 37 went down. I put it in a computer program and I have all these relationships, and now I met with somebody else. They have a new computer program. No one knows what it means, right? They're publishing the papers. They have all these relationships that this goes up, this goes down, and no one has a clue what it really means to make anybody better. But they got their paper published and they're getting ready to get promoted. And there's a value to that, especially for us here who are trying to get promoted. But are we making a difference for our patients? And so we have to have a balance between those competing interests. So we must direct our attention, our commitment and energies, creativity and resourcefulness, right? So we have a lot of smart people here. A lot of smart people who work with the people here. And can we direct all that creativity to making sure that the patients will benefit from the research versus just getting more papers out? Okay. And so I think if we think about how we're making a difference for our patients, that is sort of a grounding point that can really help us keep on track when we're doing the work we do. So as we start thinking about what is it and how is it we're going to solve problems, I think part of it is we have new complex problems. We have to think differently about how we go about solving the problems. And if we sort of just keep with our same perspectives about solving problems, I'm not sure we can really solve the problems that are facing us. At least we cannot take full advantage of our creativity to really solve those problems in a great way. So the NIH had created, when Dr. Zahuni was the director, had created this NIH roadmap. And he really is the one who helped to push forward creating research teams and collaborations. And his vision helped to create a lot of changes that we've all seen within the RCMI program. So we've seen some changes in the structure of the RCMI program, where even the G12s, which support primarily basic science infrastructure at our institutions, has sort of evolved to be more translational. What used to be clinical research centers are now clinical and translational research centers. And then it led to the creation of the RCMI Translational Research Network, which was supposed to be a thread to help connect RCMI institutions to help collaborate and promote collaborations. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So the key elements of translational research were how to take a lot of stuff that's happening in basic research, move it to the bedside, and then from the bedside, get it to the community and to policy as quickly as possible. But also, how to make sure community is telling clinicians and basic scientists what they want, right? Because otherwise, because we have a lot of people who are working on a signaling factor, not because they think it's important to help their community, but because that's what their mentor was working on. And so that it was an environment in which they developed skills for their methodology, and now they're doing it because they're sort of familiar with it, and you can use it and you get published and it's fun and you're doing stuff. But a lot of people have never even thought about, but is this going to make a difference in somebody's life? And so we have a lot of smart people with great skills, but they're not all thinking about how I'm going to make somebody's life better. Now we look at a lot of these tools here that didn't exist or were not within the grasp for many of us to use just a few years ago. These molecular libraries, the bioinformatics and computational biology, a lot of these tools are fairly expensive. Right? Nanomedicine, there's some there's nanoscience centers. A lot of these centers we don't have at our institutions, or we have them maybe at one or two of our institutions. And another institution may have computational biology expertise and personnel. And so one of the questions is from the RCMI program office was, well, we know all you guys want all of this at each institution. Everybody wants it. But there's just not money for that. So how can you share? So that's a challenge. It's something we continue to struggle with, but the question is, if these resources exist within the RCMI community, are there ways that institutions can share some of these resources? And there are certain reasons why it may be easier to share within the RCMI community than across other communities. And then similarly, are there either resources and or strategies, approaches, and other tools that we can share really at the clinical level? So does every school have strength in geographic information systems, particularly health-related geographic information systems, where they can take local community data and do analyses so they can look at health problems by zip codes and then overlay environmental data and maybe try to help figure out why a particular community has high rates of breast cancer or high rates of asthma or high blood pressure in comparison to other communities. And so with that information, then clinical trials and even collaborative basic studies looking at biomarkers could be focused on individuals in that community where you're looking at asthma. If the rates are 5 times higher, that's where you want to go and really do your studies in asthma. And while you're doing your studies in asthma as a clinician, you should be thinking about, well, what do I want to do as far as blood samples, urine samples, maybe some bronchial alveolar specimens? Who am I going to work with in basic science who's going to look at sort of the basic mechanisms at a molecular level that may be going on in these children in this community? And so now you have a whole team together and you're able to look at everything sort of at one time rather than doing everything sequentially and taking years and years and years to get the information together. And so Dr. Zerhouni said what we really want to do is promote team science and get everybody within the same sphere. He created the Clinical and Translational Science Institutes, or at least the Clinical and Translational Science applications, and schools develop Clinical and Translational Sciences Institutes or Clinical and Translational Science Centers. And within those institutes or centers, they have a variety of different partnerships with community, with basic and clinical scientists, and trying to enhance collaboration, breaking down these institutional barriers, and connecting individuals in a different way. Now, if there's one thing we have an opportunity to do around this team science at our institutions is we should be able to be better than the larger research-intensive institutions. We really should be better than they are. Why is that? We're small. We don't have, you go to Stanford, Harvard, Hopkins, you have a whole bunch of people there. They have their own little group. They have their own building. Everybody has endowments on the team. And nobody wants to talk to anybody because nobody can tell anybody anything there. So they have a history of having large silos, and people are so powerful, they didn't have to talk to anybody. And they can get everything they want, at least that they thought they wanted. And when someone says, we want you to partner, they say, I don't need to partner with it. If I need something, I'll go and get it. Everybody there is not like that, but they have many more individuals, and the structure of the system is more like that. We don't have enough money to build any silos that high. We all have them. We have them. Let's not fool ourselves. We have our little silos, but they're not that high. We don't have enough money to build them that high. We don't have enough people to make them that high. So we have a better opportunity to break down or go over our silos and start partnering and working together. So one of the main challenges is trust. So it's tough. You say, well, I don't want to partner with such and so. Everybody knows they steal everybody's data and they run away and they start doing, anytime you give them an idea, they go do it by themselves. And so I don't want to work with them. So, and that's a challenge. That's a challenge in life. So we have to be thoughtful about how we partner, how we develop these relationships, and clearly trust is an important issue. But usually as we start working together and people become more closely connected and part of a team, there tends to be more and more trust. The relationships tend to change, and the dynamics tend to change as people spend more and more time together. Because in general, if you don't know somebody, you're less likely to trust them. There may be some people, the more you know them, the less you may trust them. That's life. But in general, I think as we begin to work together and spend more time together as a university community and as a RCMI community, there will be more and more trust, and at least I think there'll be better opportunities to pull together and work as a team. So how many people have read the book 3 Cups of Tea? Okay. There's a nice little book, 3 Cups of Tea, and the author, Craig Mortensen, who spent time in primarily Pakistan helping to build schools for children and women, for young children and women, so they could learn to read. While he was there, he said as he would meet with the people in the community around building a tea, and they said, well, he's like, we got to hurry up and build these schools. He said, well, hold it. Just can't go building the schools right away. First, we need to have some tea. And so in this particular area, with this group of people who are called Baltis, they say the first time you share tea with a Balti, you're still a stranger. But the next day you have tea, and now you become an honored guest. And by the third time you have tea in the household, you are now family. Now they say, now we can go build the buildings. Now we know you, we have a relationship, and we can start doing things. And I think the same thing holds for science. It's very difficult when people, someone calls you up from across the country and says, I want to collaborate. I don't know who you are. How do I know I want to collaborate with you? And so we have to think, And everybody says, oh, well, just do it on video, conference, webinar, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's easier once you're family to use those tools. But early on, it is frequently important to have to have some time together to build trust, to build a relationship. And I think the more and more we do that within the RCMI community across partnering institutions, the better we position ourselves to really do some great team science. Okay. I do a lot of work with community engagement. So about 15 years ago, I started working with my main community partner, and we started doing lots of fun things together. I learned a lot of stuff. They used to take me on tour. So I would go in South Central Los Angeles. So I work in South Central Los Angeles. Within our hospital is recently closed down. It's a very poor area. The average lifespan for a black male in South Central Los Angeles is about 58 years of age. Okay. For the country, it's about 67. Within a 5-mile radius of our hospital, we have about 1.2 million people. Los Angeles is a pretty big place. So the county of Los Angeles has more people than 42 states. And so it's a very dense area, and we have probably the largest medically underserved community in the country. Okay. So they would take me on tour to go talk about clinical research and why people should be involved in clinical research. And we'd meet with different community groups, and I would talk about clinical research, and then afterwards they'd critique me. My team would come back and say, oh, Dr. Norris, you're too stiff. You got to do this, you got to do that, blah, blah, blah. But it was great. They would take me out there and help me practice so I could connect better and really get messages out. Because at the end of the day, I felt it was important that our community understood why clinical research was important, how people figured out that wearing seatbelts was important, and that they participated in it. That there's information that a lot of people think research is like a Frankenstein movie, but research goes into figuring out why a seatbelt can help save somebody's life. And so it was important for me to get that message out to our community so they understood that there are different levels and types of research they could participate in and help make a contribution. And if there's something that's a little more that they think like Frankenstein, we could sit down and talk about it. But at least they should be thinking about research. But what's become really important is that what happens at a social or psychosocial level, more and more data supports that influences our genes and how our genes respond. So a lot of people think that genes are sort of separate and isolated and do what they do in isolation, and that what happens at a social level or a community level is a separate entity. But that actually influences our genes, and then can alter either our behavior and or our physiology. And as well, our genes can have a significant impact on our behavior and our behavioral influences. And so there is this interdependence from a social level to a genetic to a basic level, and it's something that we need to be aware of as scientists, and something that we need to be thinking about, particularly because we have such diverse communities with a lot of different things going on at a community level, at a social level, at a psychological level, and we have great opportunities to look at how those can influence our genes and how they can influence signaling factors and protein levels, and then how the environment, other aspects of the environment, might be influential, such as environmental toxins and hydrocarbons and things of that nature, and small particles, small nanoparticles. So how all those things can come together to lead to the changes that we see in health in our communities. What do I want those genes and receptors to do next? That's probably not what we're thinking about every day. But yet that information is influencing what our genes and receptors do. Maybe we should be thinking about being a little more proactive in telling them what they should do. I don't know. Would that have a response? It may not. So again, when I talked about community research and community engagement, community engagement should just be that, a real partnership. Now, what is the difference? See, there's community collaborations or participation, there's community engagement. What is the difference? Well, everybody knows the difference when you're dating someone versus you're engaged or married to them. That's the same thing with your community partners. Right? So there's a different level of commitment to the relationship when you're engaged, when you're truly engaged, versus you're involved. So a lot of there's community involvement. So just imagine you're involved with somebody or you're engaged to somebody. That's the difference. And so there's an opportunity working with our community partners how we can really build these teams that can take a look at what's happening at a community level and actually start thinking about how we might create something as simple as how we might create an environment even for small animal studies, right? Where we can create an environment that simulates what may be happening in the community and then look at how that's affecting the physiology, gene expression, and histologically or anatomically the structure of the cells and organelles. And again, how do we make sure these advances get to patients' homes? Talking with our communities, we can really have a better understanding of why certain therapies are not getting there. Is it cost? Is it side effects? Is it a rumor that's going around that everybody says don't use this? They saw it on the internet and everybody talks about it and says don't use that medication. A lot of times we don't know. And unless we're really involved, we'll never find out. Dr. Stephen Schroeder, who used to be the head of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, said that since all actionable determinants of health, personal behavior, social factors, healthcare, and the environment disproportionately affect the poor, strategies to improve national health rankings must also focus on this population. So if we can improve the health of medically underserved communities, then if it can work there, then our strategy should work anywhere. So I'll wind up this portion of the session and we'll sort of do a little Q&A with my concept of some of the barriers that we have. And it's Daniel Bornstein, who used to be the librarian for the Library of Congress. So the greatest obstacle is not ignorance, it is the illusion of knowledge. And I think, so we all have an impression of what we know, what is in science, what is right, we have an impression of what is true. We believe it, and frequently that prevents us from thinking beyond and allowing us to be open to something else that might be more exciting, that might open up a new door. And so as we start thinking about putting together teams, as we start thinking about how are we going to improve the health of our patients, one thing we have to do is sort of set aside, we don't have to say we just forget everything we learned before. But I think what I try to do is just say it's relevant, but I need to be open to understanding that there could be a lot more. I think if we have that perspective, we have an opportunity to really harness all the potential in this room and with our colleagues and really do something great and exciting to improve the health of our communities.